So it's about time for another article discussing the vulnerabilities in the Canadian housing market because, of course, it is. Uh, every year for, I don't know, forever really, since the market's been going up, which has been a very long time, it's been an absolutely phenomenal streak in terms of the upward march of housing prices in Canada, with some exceptions, of course. But for the most part, it's just been a fairly steady increase, and we have markets like the Greater Vancouver area and the Greater Toronto area that are absolutely just mind-boggling. No real, well, not to say there's no real explanation for it, but I mean, the explanation is just the same dynamics that move the prices for anything. There's limited supply and there's a lot of demand. What's fueling demand? What's limiting supply? Those are the answers to your question. How do you get your prices? But the question really is: are we at the point right now where we're going to see a fall? Has the balloon overinflated? Is it going to be time for a pop? So let's dive into it. Home prices vulnerable to correction in multiple Canadian cities as values skyrocket, CMHC warns. Canada's housing agency is warning that the markets in multiple cities are overheated, overvalued, and highly vulnerable to a price correction as home values rapidly escalate throughout Ontario and the Maritimes. In the latest housing market assessment released yesterday, as of the time of this, Thursday, Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation added Toronto, Ottawa, and Halifax to the highly vulnerable list that already includes Moncton and Hamilton. Both Hamilton and Moncton have been in CMHC's red zone, the agency's strongest warning level, for 2 consecutive quarters. Toronto, Ottawa, and Halifax got slapped with the riskiest label as home prices rapidly escalated between the third and fourth quarters of 2020. But because the report did not analyze smaller cities and semi-rural areas in Ontario, it did not fully reflect the situation in those markets, where prices have soared as buyers have sought more space to work and live. Really, we've seen just a decentralization of workers, right? So people would normally have to crowd around urban centers. Those urban centers would get overpriced or become increasingly difficult to enter into. And what would happen is people would move to the suburbs. But then those too became very expensive to enter into. So where do you go from there? Right? Because your work most likely is in the suburbs or in the urban centers like Toronto. Really, that's really it. Or one of the surrounding areas like Mississauga or what have you, depending on the type of work you're doing. So either you're working directly in those centers or you're catering to one of those centers. And that led people to just really focus on certain areas. But now you have the opportunity to work away from the office. We can work from home. Where do you go now? The world is your oyster. Well, you know what I mean. Not obviously you can't just work anywhere in the world, but you have a lot less dependence on being in one particular space, one particular place. Your proximity to your office has loosened a bit, right? So now instead of having to be there, drive there an hour every day, maybe you can now live 2 hours away, and you drive there once a week, which isn't the craziest thing. You just turn your radio on and you go, right? Anyways, so but because the report, like I said, smaller regions are usually not on the agency's radar when they think about housing imbalances. CMHC's chief economist Bob Dugan said on a conference call in Ontario, smaller cities such as Tillsonburg, Woodstock, and Ingersoll, for example, are up more than 35%. In Barrie, Ontario, now this is just going to absolutely blow your mind. It's just absolutely phenomenal. So in Barrie, Ontario, the price of a typical detached house jumped by nearly $100,000 over 3 months to 721,000. In 3 months, it jumped that price. In February, according to data from the Canadian Real Estate Association, house prices in Kitchener-Waterloo have gone up by at least $100,000 over 3 months. Milton prices are almost $200,000 more than they were in November. Crazy. So Mr. Dugan said it would be difficult to provide a quarterly assessment on smaller markets because there's less data, and the markets can change faster with less activity relative to bigger cities, smaller supply. It's like I'm not sure if you deal with your stocks, but I guess it's probably a similar analogy to when you have your when you have your nearly illiquid stocks where there's not much trading going on. A large buy order can really shift the price on that particular stock. So Mr. Dugan said it would be. Oh, sorry. The national assessment remained at a moderate level, even though more cities moved up the risk ladder, and 5 of the 15 census metropolitan areas hit CMHC's riskiest market. A census metropolitan area is a city with a population of at least 100,000, of which 50,000 live in the core. The last time the report showed that many cities in the vulnerable group was in early 2017, when Toronto and Vancouver housing markets were overheated. But the prices didn't collapse. Right? So strong housing market activity and appreciation contributed to the emergence of new imbalances in some markets, and contributed to the worsening of the existing imbalances in already vulnerable markets, Mr. Dugan said. Hamilton, now largely a commuter city, was once a place that was considered affordable. The average selling price of a detached house is now nearly $800,000. In Moncton, the home price is up 24% in the last 12 months to February. Although the pandemic brought an influx of new residents to Moncton and cheap credit has boosted borrowing. Well, I mean, to a degree, because everybody still has the qualifying standards are still the same. So unless people are borrowing money from their own resources, like pulling out equity from their home or something like that, then I can't see why having a lower interest rate would spur more borrowing in that sense, because we still have the same qualifying standards, for the most part. I mean, there was a bit of a change, but it's relatively the same. So, I mean, you're telling me that drop is what is causing the 24% increase in the last 12 months in Moncton? Okay. I mean, maybe there's a little bit more to the story, but yeah, let's see a little bit. I mean, we can definitely take. Obviously, it has to be a factor. I'm just, to what degree of a factor is my question. Although the pandemic brought an influx of new residents to Moncton, I just read that. So the level of house prices was significantly higher than the price level warranted by changes in housing market fundamentals. Okay, so that just means overheated, yeah. Overall, the extreme price acceleration in Ontario is leading some economists and realtors to warn some of the province's real estate markets are in a bubble. Economists from Bank of Montreal and Royal Bank of Canada have called on policymakers to address the frothy market. BMO's Robert Kavchik has described the market as boiling, and has suggested finding a way to curb speculative buying and blind bidding, where home buyers do not know what the competitors are offering and trump the asking price by hundreds of thousands of dollars. RBC's Robert Hogue said, "What is exacerbating the market is buyers and sellers expect prices to continue to escalate." That's usually how it goes, right? What do you call it? It doesn't have a very nice name to it. Was it the greater fool theory? Or really it's just, hey, you have these runaway markets. Everybody continues to think that they'll just be able to flip the whatever asset it is, they'll be able to sell it to somebody else for a greater price. So it just leads to this continual buying and reselling and buying and reselling because I mean, think about it. If you bought this home in Barrie and you waited 3 months. Wait, so what? February. So February, going back, that's January, January, December, December. Oh my gosh, November. If you bought it in November or October, you could have sold it again in 3 months for $100,000 more than you purchased it for, right? So, I mean, of course, there would be this idea that you could just continually flip because this is emotional, right? You see the numbers, it's here. Look, $100,000. That's crazy. You could flip it for $100,000 more than you purchased it for. That's a lot of money, right? So then the idea is then you purchase it. Whoever's buying it from after you is going to do the same thing, turn around and do exactly the same thing. Why not? Anyways, this is obviously not healthy for the markets. It's not healthy. It's not healthy for the way things, and I'm gonna say it, are supposed to go. Because a house is not really supposed to be viewed as an investment or just something to flip. These are people's homes, and people need to be able to buy homes and be able to do that to create stability in their life. And the further we get away from that, is the more we're going to exacerbate any sort of social issues. That's not to say that this is necessarily the realm of the government to look into, but if there is something for the government to look into, if you're going to be taking a look at things, then this is definitely something that they need to take a look at. Affordable housing, and I say that in the sense not the government housing, but affordable housing, such as increasing the supply and viability of housing, right? You create new viable economic centers, and you have housing around those economic centers, right? You encourage industry to move outside of, just say, Toronto, outside of the GTA, so people can live close to work, right? They can raise their families outside of these areas. That should be an initiative, right? That should be an initiative. I mean, it's they can all they have to do is move government offices, and then all of a sudden they create a new area that doesn't even require them to do anything really. It doesn't require them to force to create a new tax. It doesn't require them to do anything. All they have to do is move government offices into areas um, that are lower priced, and they'll be able to assist with creating a new viable economic area. Over time, other things will be built there. We build more universities or colleges outside of these areas so that people will be encouraged. There would be incentive to go out, right? You can't just create incentive for people to live in places that are already so expensive. There's nothing new is going to be built in any other area because there's no incentive to go out, right? That's all we have to do. I don't think we have to do anything really crazy. Just create incentive for people to migrate out of these dense urban areas to other places. Right now, you can take a look at from environmental perspective, all that kind of stuff. Obviously, I'm expecting all those boxes to be checked, but I think that's the way we got to go if we really want to manage the situation, or else we're going to end up with a continual rise in living costs, and people are just going to be like the divide between the haves and have-nots is just going to be so massive. It's going to cause problems, right? And this is me saying that. I'm not necessarily, you know, what do you call it? I don't know. I'm not necessarily one of those people that just take from one group, give it to the other. But I do think we need to have a level of compassion when it comes to helping people manage themselves. Just have a good life. This is for our fellow Canadians, right? We want to make sure everybody's here, doing well, enjoying themselves. Life is tough enough as it is. If there's something we can do that's simple to help each other live a good life, I think we should just take a small initiative. And I think that's one that the government can do without really imposing major costs on Canadians or an additional burden on Canadians. Anyways, those are just my thoughts. So let me know what your thoughts are, because I'm curious. This is an interesting situation, and it's only going to get more interesting as time goes by, especially if there's nothing going to be done about it. So let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below, and like, share, subscribe, I guess, because I post very infrequently. Um, so it's hard to, I guess it's hard to I don't really have an upload schedule per se. I'm trying to do at least, one, two per week, but I guess we'll go from there. Anyways, enjoy the rest of your day. Stay well. Take care.